So I'm sure you guys have heard about the digital ID. So I'm telling you right now, just like I tried to warn everybody, don't take those shots. Do not take the digital ID. I don't care if you can't fly without it. I don't care if it's inconvenient. If you take that, that is the last step that they need in place to control every aspect of your life. So is it more important for you to be able to fly to see Aunt Bessie in March or April or whenever this summer, or to go to Disney World and be a slave from that point forward? Or is it more important to keep your autonomy, to keep your sovereignty, to be a free human being? Listen, let me explain something to you guys. Everybody thinks that there's nothing we can do to stop this. That is such a lie. I'm sick of hearing it. And you trolls that come in my comments talking that garbage, take that shit somewhere else. It's not going to get airplay here because it's a lie. We, the people, have all the power. We just have to wake up and realize it. Remember it. So what if 30% of the population, 50%, said, no, I'm not getting the digital ID? Well, you're not going to be able to fly. Well, so freaking what? Don't fly for 6 months. Who cares? What would happen to the airline industry if 50% of the population couldn't fly for 6 months? It would go bankrupt like that. It barely is sustainable now. So they don't have the power we do because it's our dollars that keep feeding the corrupt systems that allow them to keep us enslaved. Stop feeding it, stop complying, stop feeding it with your dollars, and watch it all crumble right before our eyes. So your lives, your freedom, it will be over. And I'm not talking decades from now, I'm talking a year or two from now. You have got to refuse this stuff when they try to push it on you. All you have to say is no. And if enough of us say no, they will yield because their system can't work. It can't thrive without our compliance and our dollars attached. Say no when they're trying to force you into things, and it will all end.
Hi, perhaps you recognize me. It's your favorite president.
We will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
Anybody in this country doesn't minimize their tax. They want their heads ring.
Socialists don't like ordinary people choosing, or they might not choose socialism.
The answer is might, because I want to do you slowly. I was saved by God to make America great again.
We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of Commanding the Narrative. My name is Stephen Tripp. Thank you to everyone who is watching this. If you are watching this live on Facebook, Rumble or YouTube, you can contribute to the conversation in the chat. We want to hear from you. The best episodes are the ones where we have a lot of people contributing, asking their questions or making their comments in the chat. And if you are really feeling up to it, and if you are really brave, you can hit that link to StreamYard and call in and ask a question or have you say or whatever it might be. It's talkback streaming. We definitely want to hear from you, and we want you to contribute to the conversation today, which will be very important. I think a lot of people are asking questions about today's topic. They want to know more about it, and we've got an expert on who we're going to be picking his brain on it. But before we get there, I'm going to let you know about how you can support us, and the best way to do it is by heading to Buy Me a Coffee. If you want to throw us a few dollars there, it helps to pay for the stream, helps to pay for the website, and most importantly, gives me a very, very warm and fuzzy feeling inside, which is very, very important. We've got some big bills coming up, so if you could contribute in any way, it would be much appreciated. Also, please head to the website, commandingthenarrative.com. You'll find everything that we do at commandingthenarrative.com. All the previous podcasts and episodes. We had a really great chat with Dr. Frank Salter on Friday about the history of eugenics. That was very, very interesting. And also we've had some other great discussions of late. You'll find that all on the website. If you want to get the newsletter, you can hit the sign up button in the top right-hand corner. And you'll also find all the past newsletters and articles. Also, the surveys here, if you want to fill in some surveys. These ones have been getting some great feedback, so check those out. And if you want to know who's on the podcast this week, it's all on the website. So it's the first port of call. Don't rely on social media. Even though our social media has been going pretty well of late, you can head straight to that website and keep up to date with everything that we're doing. And also, lastly, I want to let you know about Australians for Better Government and everything that we're trying to achieve with Australians for Better Government. It's all about reforming our system of government, optimizing the performance of government, and having a look at the Constitution, reforming the Constitution where need be, and also teaching people about civics. This is something that's really come up through the journey that we've been on with Australians for Better Government, just informing people about how our system of government works, because there's a lot of people out there that just don't know what the system is or how it operates. So head to australiansforbetter.com. Please sign up to be a member. The more members that we have, the more impact that we will be able to have on the politicians, and really getting some important change through in this country. But for now, we'll kick it over to our guest. Now, he's a very interesting guy. He's been very successful in the tech space. His name is Ric Richardson, and Ric has been the inventor of software activation, the anti-piracy tech. It's been protecting over 2 billion computers globally. He was very, involved in that and set that up. He won a $530 million jury verdict against Microsoft, which was all in the news. He settled on that. Very important court case there. He built and sold multiple companies, and he's now inventing sovereignty tech in Australia that relates to child safety, ransomware defense, and decentralized identity. And his current focus is on making the internet safe for kids without destroying privacy. So he's right up our alley. He's someone we definitely want to talk to. Let's bring him on. Ric Richardson, welcome to Commanding the Narrative.
G'day. Thanks for having me on.
Mate, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you on, because this digital ID is looming. The age verification laws around the banning of social media for under 16s. It's making a lot of people concerned out there. You saw that video in the cold open. There's a lot of influence out there trying to whip up a lot of a lot of hysteria. A lot of it may be positive, because they're trying to teach people, hey, you do have some power to push back against government. But a lot of people went through the COVID period. They lost their businesses, they lost their jobs, they may be unable to see loved ones. They felt threatened by government. They felt their livelihoods were threatened. And this whole digital ID is bringing up a lot of trauma for them. They're seeing a very similar sort of rollout. So I guess let's get into your background first. But the focus of this podcast, I really want to be on, maybe let's address the digital ID. Is it really a concern? Is it something that people should be concerned about? Or is this a lot of hype that's being whipped up by people? But before we get there, let's talk about you. What is your background in the tech space? I mentioned some things already about your lawsuit with Microsoft, which is probably one of the biggest. But, over to you.
Well, I was in the music industry, and then had to work out how to distribute some music software, and ended up inventing what we all know as software activation, or the beginnings of try and buy software. So, every time you saw a unlockable or a trial piece of software, you're actually using a technology that started back in 1992. And ever since that time, I've actually ended up being a much better inventor than I was a musician. Although I did actually work in the music industry, so I did okay.
Yeah, wow. Tell us about the court case with Microsoft. So what was that about? You invented something that they used without. Just explain that a little bit more.
Well, whenever you used Windows or Office and you had to lock your serial number and obtain a number from them that basically locked that device to the machine. That was right through the late 1990s and through to the early teens of the 2000 teens. That was the way all software got distributed. And I actually invented that. And that's the reason why it's on 2.5 billion machines. So it was on all the copies. It's still on Windows and Office today. So, it's pretty, it's a bit overwhelming when you think about it, but, it's a pretty good first shot out of the gate to get it used on that wide. I just wish that I had worked out how to get them to pay up front rather than have to get people to pay after the fact, you know.
Well,
So,
you were in a court case for over 10 years, is that right?
yeah, nine to the court to the yeah. It actually ended up until we settled. It was about 11 years.
Yeah, okay. So on your website, it says that right now your focus is on making the internet safe for kids while also protecting privacy. I mean, how did you fall into that space?
Actually, I was just doing the outline of how to explain that, and what happened is a mutual friend of the e-safety commissioner, a lady who is one of the locals here, she said that she'd spoken to the e-safety commissioner and, you know, talking about how hard it is to solve this problem, social media companies and also for, you know, adult sites. And she said, oh, I know this gentleman, this inventor up in Byron Bay. He should have a shot at this. He probably knows what to do. And I kind of looked at the problem just, you know, from, you know, a glance, and I thought, how hard could it be? It turned out to be quite hard, but it's not the hardest thing I've ever had to solve, but it's up there. And funny enough, the hardest thing I've had to solve is detecting sharks in the water. Excuse me, because that's a big problem for Byron. And so, you know, that's still, it's on the way to getting solved, but, you know, still there's always big problems to, you know, try and wrap my arms around it. It's all about the fun of solving the problem and a lot less about the, you know, the payout or it's really good to see things that really impact people, you know, and this really does. I've got 5 grandkids, so, you know, it really hits home that it's a thing that should be fixed. And it's turns out the answer was pretty obvious when we worked out how to do it.
Okay, well, let's talk about digital ID itself, because that's going to be one of the biggest focuses on this podcast. And I talked about at the start about, you know, a lot of people out there being very, very concerned about the rollout of digital ID. They don't trust the government because of what happened during COVID. Some of them didn't trust government even before COVID. And they see this as a march towards a social credit system as what we see in China. I mean, your general view of digital ID and these sorts of things, should we be concerned, or is it just a lot of hype to say that these are things that we should really be worried about?
I'm in my early 60s, so I'm old enough to remember the Australia card days, and I call it Australia carditis. You know, so everybody's averse to the idea of one central number that basically tracks everything you do and centralizes all your identity and everything you own. You know, I lived in the States for a decade, and you know, you really get conscious of the fact that once they start tracking everything about you and putting it in one database, it becomes a really big problem. So, you know, I've always been really averse to that problem, but I think there's a real lot of misconceptions around digital identity, especially the way the gentleman at the beginning of your pod was just talking about it, because there is a flavor of digital identity that is quite dangerous, but actually there's at least 2 or 3 technologies which are actually being implemented at a wide scale that are actually the reverse. They're safer than paper. They're safer than having a plastic driver's license, and they are controllable by you as the owner of those documents. So it's, you know, once we get into this, I can explain that in a bit more detail. I hope I'm up to speed and being able to help your listeners. You know,
well, let's
try and work it out. So.
Yeah, maybe let's jump into that straight away, because we're seeing this digital ID rolled out across the world. I mean, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, just announced that they're going to need a digital ID to work in the UK. We're seeing it being announced in Canada, and also there was press release just released recently in New Zealand where they're saying that they're looking at the Australian model and they want to adopt the Australian model. So this is being rolled out across the world. Firstly, why do you think that is? And then maybe go into some of the better systems that you mentioned. Are they government systems, or are they other systems that people can adopt?
Well, first of all, I should really clarify, because this business of calling everything a digital ID and then making a sweeping statement about what that means is really erroneous. Because a digital ID means that it's just a digital identity versus a physical identity, a paper identity. There's no real technical definition of what a digital ID is, but when people hear about it, it's usually the loudest voice and the most derogatory version of that actually sticks to apply to that, what a digital ID actually, infers. But, when you look at in Australia, what's the underlying basis, the policy for a digital identity is the Digital ID Act. And the Digital ID Act is actually very protective of people's rights. And it's very protective of individuals. And in fact, there's a term that's used technically in the world and technically by experts in my field, and that is self-sovereign. And any digital identity that's self-sovereign is not dangerous for us as individuals. I could tell you unequivocally it's not dangerous for us.
Well, I guess maybe let me hit you with people's biggest concern. They don't want to see this go to where it is in China, where we hear stories about everyone's banking, everyone's passwords are all in this centralized digital ID. And if the government want to, stop you from flying on an aeroplane, they can do it. If they want to stop you from having a bank account, they can do it. Is there a pathway for that here in Australia?
Yeah. Well, must excuse me. Sorry. The big difference between what some people call digital identity and what the world is actually moving towards in terms of digital identity is the difference between centralized and decentralized identity. They both can be digital, but centralized identity means that a central database or a federated database, which means one database that's copied in many places, has all the data, and everything that happens gets accumulated back to a hub where that can be correlated and used for surveillance and all kinds of scoring and analytics and all of that kind of thing. And that's what you're seeing in China. Okay. And the thing is that when people use WeChat, everything's so convenient with it. But the problem is you can't reverse that because you become dependent on a system that then becomes dominated by people with intentions that the user obviously never had. So, I've had a little bit of experience with a family member who went to the UAE, where they have central apps where that your identity is included, and it's very convenient and everything. But things happen, like, for example, if you don't pay a parking fine, it can put a stopper on you actually leaving the country because everything's centralized, right? So the really important thing about any identity system is for it to be what's called decentralized, or technically the term's called self-sovereign. And that means that you, as the user, actually control the cryptographic keys that allow the usage of your own credentials or licenses or identity pieces. And then these credentials actually don't sit in central databases. They're not connected the way a decentralized credential works is that everything you need to check the identity is actually on the credential that's on your phone.
Okay,
Right?
we've got a question from Tony here. I mean, she's talking about blockchain. Is that what you're talking about? Is this a blockchain type system?
Well, there are flavors of this that actually do use a blockchain, but the reason that you use the blockchain is for what's called a DID, which is a decentralized identity. Not all systems use DIDs, but decentralized identities are very convenient because it means that you have an identifier that's on a blockchain, and you can add devices to that DID and take devices away. So, for example, if someone steals your phone, you can knock the DID, the identity for that device, off your own DID. If you add a tablet, you can add an identity, right? So it's a way of conveniently keeping track of who owns who you decide gets access to your own identity, but enabling people to verify that you are the owner of that identity. But there's nothing particularly identifying in that blockchain. All it is basically keys, the same way as a Bitcoin blockchain is just keys. You don't know, there's no name, there's no, there's a wallet address, but you don't really see it until you, move it to another, the balance to another wallet. And even then, people have to do a whole lot of things to try and track you down.
And can you explain the system that was set up in the digital ID bill that the government passed? So if you wanted to use the government's digital ID, is that a decentralized system, or is that?
You're talking about the bill or the current approaches to digital identity?
So when my understanding is that people can sign up to the government digital ID.
Yep.
What system is that? How does that operate?
Well, there's actually two systems that are in different levels of transition. The Digital ID Act actually is written for and is predominantly geared towards a decentralized self-sovereign model. And in fact, Australia is moving towards a decentralized model, as is all of Europe. Actually, all the 29 or 26 European countries, they use what's called a UDI wallet, an EU digital identity wallet. And that wallet is, by definition, a decentralized identity wallet. In fact, it uses a standard called the W3C, decentralized identity standard, which the W3C are the same people that design browsers and administer the HTML standard and everything. So, they're people that have really done a good job of making sure that the internet remains free and it doesn't get taken over by special interest groups or by politically, political actors. So the problem with the way digital identity or identity has been done in the past is that TDIF, which is the standard which Australia has used up until the last 3 or 4 years, was a database-based identity system, but it was really only used for a few government departments. It wasn't really used for a complete, countrywide infrastructure. And the migration away from that kind of centralization is actually well along. It's just a big, slow-moving behemoth. Everybody has their investment. Like TDIF took a few $1 billion to get it to work, and now we're turning around and the world's moving in a different direction. On the other side of it, you have people toying with systems that are hybrid, centralized. They do some of the nice things that a true decentralized identity wallet do. For example, there's a process called selective disclosure, which means that if you have a driver's license, you can get the driver's license details given to you in such a way that you can have an attribute or a particular part of that driver's license that you can present, and it's quite legal. And all it says is, yes, the government did give you a driver's license, and yes, it is current. And that's all the person that's making the inquiry gets. So the government actually has done a big job of getting the old antiquated system to actually accommodate things like that. But they haven't gone far enough yet, because they're not yet got to the point where they're doing full decentralized. But in fact, the Digital Identity Act actually mandates that for the future.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I actually, because I'm a member of DSAC, which is the Data Standards Advisory Committee for the department, the Treasury Department.
Yep.
And I'm actually quite proud of the good-heartedness of the people trying to solve the problem, and also the way that, like, there's banks there, there's energy companies are there. There's, it covers medicals, all kinds of things. And it's basically, it's talking about how data is handled in open systems like the banking system. But the digital identity area is gradually becoming part of our purview, just simply because you can't really have credentials and not know how to identify the person that has the credentials. And you've got to do a good job of it, because you can't have this data floating around and being used by people that it's none of their business to know what you're doing or not doing. So, in that way, I'm a typical Australian that I like my privacy, and so I think, and most Australians are like that. They really do kind of expect that. So I totally agree with them.
Well, let's talk about the age verification bill, which is coming in related to this social media ban, because this is the main thing that people are worried about. It's coming in on December 10th, and it's been a lot of people were under the assumption that they were going to need a digital ID to now access social media and other things. Now, this is from the eSafety website, and it says the Australian government is protecting young Australians at a critical stage of their development through world-first social media age restrictions. From the 10th of December, age-restricted social media platforms will have to take reasonable steps to prevent Australians under the age of 16 from creating or keeping an account. The restrictions aim to protect young Australians from pressures and risks that users can be exposed to while logged in to social media accounts. These come from design features that encourage them to spend more time on screens while also serving up content that can harm their health and well-being. As of the 5th of November 2025, that was 5 days ago, it is eSafety's view that Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Threads, TikTok, X, YouTube, Kick, and Reddit are age-restricted platforms. This list will continue to be updated prior to the 10th of December. More generally, age restrictions will apply to social media platforms that meet 3 specific conditions, unless they are excluded based on criteria set out in legislative rules made by the Minister for Communications. And also, there's some key features of this legislation. The first one is that platforms, the social media platforms themselves, are going to be responsible for preventing under 16s from using or creating accounts. Platforms must offer reasonable alternative methods to digital ID. So you won't just have to be forced into a digital ID, but you can also use biometrics or facial recognition or other things. People are concerned about those as well. And the eSafety Commissioner has enforcement powers, including almost $50 million of penalties for non-compliance for these social media companies. So I guess my first question to you is, why do you think the government has come in and taken responsibility of kicking kids off social media? I mean, a lot of people are making the argument that should be up to parents, and that the parents should be the there's decision makers or whether their kids should use social media, because people are arguing there's a lot of positives for some social media use. I mean, do you feel comfortable with what the government's doing in this field?
Well, my personal opinion is like in our family, the computer was always in a place where my daughter's mum and I could see what she was doing. She eventually got her own phone, but so we, as a family, we're very tech savvy, and my daughter's very tech savvy. She's a 35-year-old mother now, so she has her own headaches growing up. My personal view is that it's definitely needed, and but the way to frame the issue, from my experience, is the way you think of what's happening on social media. There's two different views of it. One is that it's like alcohol, which a pub shouldn't serve a kid alcohol, but if a parent wants to allow their kids to experience the taste of sherry or to have a taste of beer at home, that's their prerogative. And it's not really the purview of a policeman to come in and police that. It's something that can easily be handled by the parents. But as a society, we also have a pretty strong view of the use of drugs, and the number of parents handing out heroin, I hope, is a low number. And as a community, people kind of are really strongly against that. So really the problem that the government has in defining this issue is more how directly do you, police this effort. But I think the majority of Australians, and like I as a grandfather, feel that really you can't just leave the social media companies and other, adult content sites to self-police. The days of having a button that says, click this if you're under 18 is kind of like they should have been over a long time ago. Come on.
But I mean, ridiculous. the government has handed the responsibility of regulate or policing this to the social media companies. We just saw a data breach at Discord where a lot of people apparently their personal information was hacked. I mean, are you concerned about that you're going to have to, I guess, prove your identity to these different social media companies, and your information is going to be held in different places?
Well, this is where the pitch starts, because what I came up with basically ignores all identity. There is no identity. It's a very simple system. And, when you feel comfortable enough for me to do the pitch, the SafeGen pitch,
let's go into it now. Yeah.
But just before you go into that, the big problem is that just before we go into how SafeGen solves the problem, the issue for all of these tech companies is that they really haven't thought quite ingeniously. There's been no motive for them to actually solve the problem in a smart way that actually gives power to the parents. Every technology that I've seen that tries to help parents turns into a real technological minefield. It's mind-bending. I was talking to one parent who has two kids at the 13 to 15 age bracket, and he's actually an IT specialist. And his battle with his daughters, he rings me up and tells me about what they get up to, and it's like, please give me a hacker to track. Kids, they're sneaking all kinds of stuff, sneak access to his phone and give him arguments, and then do the silent treatment, and parents just, it's really tough on parents trying to do that. So, in trying to solve the problem, it's really important to work out how to make it really easy for them to do, and also make it really convenient for the social media companies to do, so they don't have any excuse. Like, to give you an idea, we just did a costing in the last month, looking at how much it's going to cost to be running AI and digital identity checking and face scans and looking at people's feeds and trying to work out whether they're a kid or not. You're talking about upwards of $800 million per year across all the social media companies, right? That is, and who's going to pay for that? They have to get the advertising income from that. They really don't want to do it. They don't see what the issue is. Shareholders don't really, some of them obviously are nice people like normal Australians, but people have invested to make a living out of it. And so they just want the problem solved. They just want it to go away. So you get this real conundrum, and the government, frankly, from what I've seen of the way the government's been working this, is they have basically taken a position that we've had enough. You guys, the technologists, you can work out how to solve this. They spent $6.5 million going off and doing the AATT, the Age Assurance Technology Trial, not to find a solution, but just to demonstrate to the social media companies that, well, there are 60 ways you can solve the problem. We were one of them. We were one of 62. So we're the little pipsqueak Australian out of all the others who are all big international companies with digital identity companies and face artificial intelligence scanning companies, paying, the same company that does biometric checks for the ATO is also in their Yoti, and they're charging upwards between 9 cents and $1.50 per scan. So it really gets expensive to do all this stuff, and people aren't really thinking, hey, someone somewhere along the line is going to pay for this. And the problem is it's not really working that well. So, which kind of brings me to my solution to this, because I looked at AI for about 6 months when we first started solving this problem. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Surely there's someone who knows how old the kids are. And there is. They're sitting right in front of everyone. They're the parents. Well, hopefully every parents know the general year. Some parents struggle on the month. Don't ask me how when my birth dates are and my grandkids. I know how old they are. But, so there's a ready-made source of truth about the age of kids. And so the trick, which was quite hard for me to see until I threw a bit of brain power into it, was actually the connection of the parents' knowledge of the age and the use. Majority of young kids are accessing the internet from their mobile phones, and the happy coincidence that the social media companies all use use mobile phones as a second factor in logging in. So because the kids have to use a phone to log into their account, all the parents need to do is send a PIN to their kid's phone. They have to wrangle the phone off their kids first, which I can see some parents struggling to do that. But you get the phone off the child, you send a PIN to it, you put the PIN back into the system, which actually adds that mobile phone number to a safe list. And the safe list is just a single database that all the social media companies can use, and the adult companies, the adult content companies, can all use the central database to find out if the person that's visiting their site and their mobile phone is actually on the list. And there's a tricky way we did that, because there is a technique called hashing, which enables you to scramble those phone numbers, so that if somebody just got the phone numbers broke into our systems and got the phone numbers, they could never work out what the phone numbers are in the database, because you actually have to get the original phone number as it comes through from the social media companies to be able to do the descrambling and work out, whether the number's on the list or not.
So you're talking about this safe gen which you've set up.
Yeah.
So it's what you're saying is, instead of having someone have to prove their identity and their age, you're basically making the phone the key, and the key set up by the parent. So to be able to access certain apps, all that's just a key on the phone itself.
Yeah.
You don't have to prove the identity or anything like that. Is that
No?
basically
That's the whole thing. If a parent can get access to their kid's phone, I understand there are some parents that really struggle with something like that, but majority of them can. So the first cab off the rank is to solve that problem by just using mobile phone numbers. There's a number of technologies coming on down the track, which include device identifiers. So there is actually unique device identity. Actually, Apple and Google use them for their own operating systems, so they could easily cooperate to help pick up things like tablets and laptops and things that don't actually have a mobile phone number. But also it can be easily adopted by telcos, so that when a parent buys a SIM for their child or a phone for their child, they can have the device safe listed at that time. So it's, like, my big issue was in trying to solve this problem is to find the 2 million kids that are in the firing line of this. You actually have to make the other 24 million Australians jump through all kinds of hoops and hope they don't look young for their age, or or have to pull identity out to go to a social media site. We're not logging into a bank. So it's obvious sometimes the simplest solutions are the best, and I've had a couple of lucky doozies in my time, and this is one of them. I hope everybody will see the light. So
I've got a question here from Tony, and this is my question as well. How comfortable is the government with your solution? I mean, is what you're proposing an option for people? I mean, are they going to be able to use your safe gen system, or do you need the government to, I suppose, authorize it first?
No, actually, it's already been authorised because it's part of the AATT approval process. So we've already been given the green light. The big problem is that for the government to give the real nod to the social media companies is for them to start to look more at technologies like what we're working on, so that we can get the cost of this down and the imposition on people's privacy is reduced. So, in a personal conversation with the e-safety commissioner, who I found her really quite reasonable, and as a parent too, I could just tell that she was connecting with what we were talking about. But the government hasn't. One, they don't want to take sides in this thing, and I can just feel it whenever I talk to a government, to a minister or a government appointee, or somebody high up in the government. You can feel that they actually like the idea of an Australian solution, but they've got to actually look at everything that the social media companies are interested in doing. But at the moment, they're all sitting on their thumbs, basically saying that the app stores should do it, or that it's somebody else's problem, or parents should solve the problem at home, or they should put more money into, educating. And but for this year, the under 16 social media issues feels like, get the guns moment, where people kind of thought, oh, this is a big ask. They're going out to actually pick up every rifle and air gun and everything in the country. How's that going to work? And then, Australian common sense comes along and the rest of the world's going, what just happened? Because, Australian common sense, came to the fore. But, so I'm pretty confident that once the way this works, and once the social media companies give up on the hope that they're going to get out of this by threatening to go to court and all the other nonsense, parents, it's 80% of parents want it. There probably wouldn't be many kids watching this podcast, would there?
No, well, not
right.
live at least.
No, right. Well, because the reason why is that one of the deciders for me to become this to become a big issue was when I saw reports of what social media is doing around the world. And one report stated that 70% of kids in the UK have seen a beheading. And so when I repeat that to other adults, to politicians, or to senior bureaucrats that I meet, and they go to check it out, it's for anyone of a mature age, you don't go looking around for a beheading. It is so repulsive to do that. You know that it's somewhere on the internet, that kind of thing is there. And if somebody's really bent on, finding it, they can. But you don't go, a mature person doesn't need to have that in their life. But 70% of the kids in the UK have seen a beheading. And there's no excuse for that.
Well,
there really is no excuse for that.
Well, then how come the government has just focused on social media platforms and they haven't focused on, I suppose, other platforms like porn sites or some of the gaming sites where apparently they can be preyed on by different predators? I mean, those seem to have been excluded.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Because there's a couple of technical reasons. I have my theories about it. Because when I started looking for a solution, a design for this, the hardest ones to actually police with any technology are the porn sites, because you can do things like one, it's not an app, which means they don't have app store restrictions. All you need is a browser, and even if you do nation gating, where you actually stop access to particular domains, people actually do that, but kids are so smart. The majority of people that buy VPNs are kids because they're looking at Netflix and everything overseas. And then next thing you know, they're looking at porn as soon as, what happened in Texas, when they banned porn sites in Texas, unless they have some age assurance, the VPN sales just went through the roof.
Yeah, right.
So, it's kind of like it's a whack-a-mole, game of whack-a-mole. So if you don't find an underlying technical solution that really addresses the issue at the child's device level, you're really playing catch up all the time. Of course, kids are going to sneak access to non-protected machines. They're going to get their own machine. There's going to be kids who buy their own SIM. You're always going to have that, the same way as you get kids that are going to pay people to go and get alcohol for them. But the bottom line is, we're not going to be spending, hundreds of millions of dollars on a police force to go around and get the fringe cases. The idea is, as a society, Australians have made a decision that, we want the kids protected, and we want everything reasonably done to make sure that they are protected, and that these companies aren't just allowed to do whatever they feel. But on the other hand, my heart really goes out to them, because it's not an easy solution. If your whole job is to engage people, and if you'd like to get people addicted to the idea of looking at 30-second videos, at 11 years old, then, that's their view of the world, but it's not Australian parents' view of the world. So,
Yeah, I know we've got a 3 p.m. Cut off. I mean, we're getting very close towards the end, so I want to squeeze in a couple more questions. I mean, I could talk to you for another hour about all this stuff and really pick your brain.
That's all right, mate. Actually, I just got a tingle that I can move on. So if you'd like to stay a bit longer, I'm happy.
Okay, all right. Well, let me ask a few other things. This might be not related, but QR codes. I use QR codes to get some of our information out sometimes, and people are really concerned about using QR codes. And one of the comments that was made to me was that if they were to use a QR code, that somehow could potentially give someone access to their phone. Is that the case? I mean, is there any path for that to happen, or what's your view on QR codes?
The way to think of QR codes, you grabbed a propeller head, and so now I'm stuck doing propeller head answers, but I'm okay with it. So, but I do get this every now and then, just because people assume I'm like, well, my wife knows that I'm no good at being a handyman, so might as well just ask him to do technical questions. So QR codes, you just got to think of them as elaborate URLs, domain links. And so domain links can go all over the place. You can have a domain link that takes you to a website that can do any QR code can do anything that a URL can do, and URLs can actually get you to load malware, can get you to do all kinds of things. Is that with DNS, which is your domain name system, and HTTPS, which is the technique used to validate that the domain name that you're connecting to is the one that actually owns, the person that actually owns that domain. So domains can't be spoofed, meaning you can't accidentally connect up to cba.com thinking you're connecting to a bank and you're connecting to a Malaysian drug ring, So, they've solved that problem. So the URL problem has actually been solved, and QR codes are just an extension of that. When it comes to using QR codes in digital identity, the big convenience factor is what you see in China, where WeChat is basically a QR code driven system, where people show their phone, they actually show their phone to another person, or they have a monitor where they can see a QR code that enables them to log in. And it's so popular to do that because phones find it much harder to read a URL, a hyperlink. So it's really just a way of being able to connect up a hyperlink. That's the way to think about it. But it's not particularly more scary than just clicking on a link. And that can be scary.
It's not the QR code itself is not going to it's not going to be a gateway for people to access your phone, but the actual link itself could potentially be dangerous, just like any link out there.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, I saw one the other day where a QR code for a parking station had an overlay put over the top of it. So if you see a sign that actually looks official, like a parking sign, and then you see a QR code, and they go to the place and start paying for it, and you think that you're talking to a parking station, and somebody just puts a sticker over the top of it, that kind of thing can happen. But you actually can check what's going on by just looking at the URL and see that it's not Queensland parking. It's Queensland parking.so or some other domain name. So you just need to be smart.
Yeah.
You just need to be.
Another one is facial recognition. I mean, that's going to be one of the options for people to use instead of a digital ID. I mean, they can also use biometrics like thumbprints or whatever it might be. I know some people already, friends of mine or people that I know have already left social media because it was asking them to do some facial recognition stuff just to prove their identity in different cases. What for you? Do you have concerns with facial recognition stuff? Is it more or less secure than digital ID? I mean, what are your general views?
Well, so there's quite a few things on this subject. Boy, I sound like I know everything.
Yeah, well, that's why we've got you on, mate. That's why you're here.
But so the big thing about facial recognition is that it's become easier in the last 2 or 3 years to do a really good job of it, and everybody's got used to using facial scanning because it's a really great, convenient way of getting in and out of secure areas of your device. So both Google and Apple have the Face ID equivalent, and the beaut thing about their systems is that your biometrics never leave the phone. The face scan is only used by your phone to enable you to get access to secure areas of your phone that stops other people from being able to get into your phone unless they have the same face as you, right?
Yeah.
So, so Face ID is really great, and it's got everybody comfortable with, using face scanning. There is a system that the Australian government uses, which is called level 3 identity checks. So there's different levels of identity checks. Like level 1 is I sent a photocopy of a driver's license, or you have a Google email account or something else. Then level 2 is you have your 100 points, but it doesn't necessarily mean you've done a biometric check. So it's things like photocopy of your driver's license, Medicare card, an energy statement, something else like that. That's level 2. And most Australians will never have to go past level 2. Level 3 is when you've got a lot of responsibility, when you're doing tax, big tax transactions, or you want to get a large amount of money off a grant or receive money from the government. You have to do Face ID because of the way in the past that, fraud has been, abused. So identity has been abused in the past. But actually, a lot of the pressure that has come over the years will go away with decentralized identity because it's such a powerful protocol. The need for that will be very limited. But I personally actually find biometrics convenient to use as long as the biometric data is not stored anywhere but on my machine. And if it is used by a government department, it's used in such a way that it does a one-time verification of the person that's making the application for an identity is actually the person that has the phone right now. And then they don't keep that photo on short-term storage. They put it back into deep storage. For example, the ATO gets access to the state driver's license photograph databases. And, nobody really gets upset with photo IDs, photos being taken for driver's licenses. It's about whether they are used for, 100 different ways to interact with the government. And every time you do anything, they're being pulled up and used to track you and to do all kinds of other things, nefarious things. But that is really, if you, oops, sorry.
All right.
That was actually the chief, the chair of the DSAC just then calling me. So,
probably watching going, get off that bloody podcast.
No, he's from he actually he and I go way back. We served together on with the Digital Identity Ministerial Advisory Committee for Minister Dominello. And, like there's some really good-hearted, good people that have, been trying to solve this problem for years. And there's not, I never felt with any of them, a conspiratorial, attitude or, underlying agenda with it. The biggest problem is that the super tanker, the the identity super tanker, which is the DTA, which is the body that originally had the identity issue, identity responsibility, they actually invested a lot of money in trying to get a system to work that now, unfortunately, is pretty antiquated and is getting replaced.
Yeah, it's funny when you say that. I was in a conversation with a New South Wales member of Parliament when someone asked him about smart cities and whether we should be concerned about smart cities, and he said, "I've never heard about it. It's never come up in Parliament. And if you think that these politicians and bureaucrats are capable of implementing something as complex as smart cities, then you've got another thing coming," or something along those lines. I mean, is that a big part of this as well? I mean, the governments are trying to implement technologies that are very complex. I mean, it's not as easy as just putting up a camera and start tracking people. I mean,
Minister Dominello is the most consumer-centric politician I've ever had dealings with. And he is quite comfortable with technology. But you could see the line like a razor where he just lost his depth about it. It is quite technical, this space. And these people with all of these responsibility, it's a wonder they have any mind space for anything beyond the direct responsibilities they have, because it's a big field. And you've got to remember, the bureaucracy is really big. The investment is really big. The number of databases there are, and the way that data has to be managed, and all the thoughts. Like at the moment, we're trying to unravel how to make sure that everyday Australians get access to their data in the open banking system. And when you look at the details of how it works, it's really an achievement that, open banking is working at all. So the thought that it's actually going to be streamlined and really working well in the future, and we're going to have decentralized digital identity is, really, there's a lot of good people working really hard to make that happen.
When you speak, I mean, just a couple more questions. When you speak of this decentralized digital identity, are these private companies going to be running this? I mean, are people going to be able to opt in to are there going to be different variations of the decentralized digital? How is that all going to be set up?
Well, it's like, just think of decentralized identity the same as you do with browsers.
Yeah, okay.
The tools that actually can use the web is the same as the wallets that are going to be able to give you credentials. And then companies and governments can give people credentials, which you have in your own wallet, digital identity wallet, and you control it and you say how those are being used. So when somebody says to you, I want to check whether you're over 18, they can ask you via a QR code or a URL, they can say, please prove that you're over 18. And the attribute or the part of your credential that they get to see is just a government certified attribute that says you've got a driver's license and you're over 18. Nothing about your driver's license number or your birth date or your address or any of that. No photo, and so that's what a decentralized identity really means. It's quite a wonderful technology. And because it's an open standard, that's really important for it to be an open standard and not a closed standard. that means that everybody in the world uses the same standard. So California is W3C compliant. All of Europe is W3C compliant. Australia is becoming W3C compliant. I can't speak for the UK, but I've got a very dear friend who has got a lot of responsibility there, who is also trying to make sure it's W3C compliant. So it's inevitable that, decentralized identities will take off. And that's particularly the reason why I'm seeing, I'm feeling a bit with this, strong language around digital identity is not really appropriate, because it swipes the whole gamut of technologies, some of which are essential for us in the future. Like being able to move from country to country without being tracked, but for everybody to know that they can have confidence that you are not a blacklisted person, that, you don't have some, terrible back history, so those are the kind of things which, every country has the right to, to expect people to provide. But being able to use that as an opportunity to track everywhere you go and when you pay for coffee and, come on, that's that's what Australians are getting their back up against.
Yeah. Look, mate, thanks for coming on. I got one more question. There's a lot more questions in the chat as well, but we're not going to be able to get to those, unfortunately. But when this date, December 10th, does rock around and someone jumps on Facebook or Instagram and suddenly they're confronted with having to prove their age, and they've got the option of either using the digital ID or a biometric or whatever it might be. If they really want to protect their individual sovereignty, what is the best option for them? I mean, are you happy with all the options, or is there one that you think they should?
You want me to do a pitch? Come to safegen.com.au and sign up. We're up to.
Well, is that an option? I mean, are people going to be able to use your system?
No, there's actually a briefing being circulated at government levels right as we speak. So actually the list, we only started last week, and there's already 1,000 people signed up to it. Well, it'll be 1,000 in the next day or so. So 8/24 it is. So so all it is you just register your number. It gets turned into a hash. You get notified when it's time to add your children's number, and bang, you're off. There you go.
Yeah. So you need 1,000 people to sign up to this, and you're at 8/24.
We wanted to get to 1,000 before we started going seriously on publicity and everything, and also putting our hand up and saying formally to the government that's about time that we actually looked at something that wasn't going to cost us $800 million. To me, one is, I don't want a generation of kids seeing beheadings. And oops, sorry, that's the people that I should have been on with. We don't want parents, worrying about their kids seeing beheadings, and we don't want for the thing to be impositioning all the other Australians out there. Look after the kids, but don't impact the rest of Australia for it while you're doing it.
Yeah. Look, mate, thank you very much for coming on. I know you got to rush off, so we'll let you go. But I really appreciate it, and hopefully we can have you on again in the future to discuss this a little bit more, because I think people are really interested in this stuff.
Happy to. We go seriously next week in publicity, so you'll see a bit more of us, from next week on. You got us a bit early.
Yeah, no, well, look, mate, send it through when you got some more answers, and we'll get it out to the audience.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank Rick.
See ya. Bye-bye.
See you, mate. And well, everyone, hopefully that answered some of your questions. It's a very complicated space. There are a lot of concerns from people about this. I mean, I'm still a little bit concerned, but from speaking to Rick, I mean, he's dealing with the e-safety commissioner directly, and some of the people in government. He seems to think that they're got the best interests at heart. So hopefully we can take Ric's word for it, and hopefully some of your concerns have been alleviated from this. So I think we do always need to put pressure on governments to not take our rights away from us. And that's a big part of the process with government, to put pressure on the politicians to always do the best things for us, the people that they're meant to be representing. But look, let me know what you think in the comments. Reach out to us, and we might be able to get Ric back on in the future, or maybe have another expert on to discuss this, because this December 10th deadline is fast approaching, and a lot of people still got some big questions in regards to their digital identity and everything that comes along with that. But for now, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.